Bites Back is me, Jonathan King, travelling around the world in my cars, looking at various foods that I may be eating, visiting various different cities and places and countries, going from London through France, Spain to Morocco, in Marrakesh at the moment, also commenting on news items, on films, television, on books that I've been reading, and also playing you the occasional snatch of music, generally from my back catalogue. I hope you enjoy it. Kevin Spacey. I have to admit, I haven't even watched the Ch4 couple of programmes about him, because I think actually this kind of television is disgraceful. I think it's actually criminal. It may or may not be libelous, but it is absolutely not the way that a responsible broadcaster or programme maker ought to be making. Because unproven false allegations, which is the scourge of this new century, are just unfair and wrong. But where I do know about Kevin Spacey, I don't think I've ever met him. He had a reputation way back in the 90s and even before that of going a bit too far. Everybody knew he was gay, although he wasn't actually admitting it, because at the time you really couldn't. I mean, until a certain point, I think until 97, it was a crime to go with anybody under the age of 18, and before, only just shortly before that, 21. So it was sort of really something you, especially if you're a public figure, you could not risk doing. Partly because it would ruin your reputation and you might even end up in prison, but mainly because the situation was you were opening yourself up to all kinds of blackmail. It's a crime blackmail which has sort of slipped off the radar this century, and I think it's been replaced by the new crime of legal false allegations, either to the police or even in civil cases. And I now see that Kevin Spacey is now having to face civil cases, civil allegations from men who have either not made any complaint to police, certainly not been convicted of police by the courts, but now they're making claims, and it's for personal injury, and it all basically comes from the situation of people desperately wanting to make a lot of money, please, and being persuaded to do so quite often by ambulance chasing law firms. These are the law firms, of which two in particular are very famous for it, who track down and find out people who would be prepared to make allegations, be they false or true, and to say that it has seriously damaged their lives, in return for probably, usually, the law firm doing everything on a no-win, no-fee basis. So basically, people have got nothing to lose. And most of these cases end up being settled out of court on the courtroom steps, because people realize, well, two things happen. One thing is that the defendant, whom these allegations, quite often false allegations, are being made against, suddenly find out Quox, Q-O-C-S. I've mentioned Quox before. Quox is a law that came in British legal situations back in, I think, 2013. And what it basically does is guarantee that a claimant, even if it's totally false, even if at trial their claims are thrown out and considered completely worthless, they still do not, the defendant, the person who the claim has been made against, still does not ever get his or her costs back. And those costs can be enormous, because defence lawyers and barristers and solicitors cost a fortune, let alone the money you spend, and you have to spend, on private investigators, if you know of a good one, and they're as rare as hen's teeth, who can investigate the person or the people making the allegations, and usually will find out the most appalling things they've done in their past, including quite often crimes. But all of that costs an absolute fortune. And so even if it goes to trial and the claims are totally dismissed and considered to be wholly without merit, which is the phrase used by judges in many of these cases, you still do not get your costs back, and it can cost you hundreds of thousands of pounds. So as a result, most people are prepared to settle on the courtroom steps for tens of thousands of pounds, probably half of which goes to the lawyers, because no win, no fee. That means they don't charge a fee, so they need the money, please. And the other half, which is still a substantial amount, goes to people who quite likely have made something up totally, who may never even have met the people they're accusing of doing things. Well, I think what we're watching now is the Kevin Spacey situation going into a similar kind of area. More about Kevin in a moment.
While you're walking down the street and you hear that I'm around, and you wonder if we'll meet as your footsteps pound the ground, if I smile across the road, I hope you'll realize what I'm saying with my eyes is I love you. If across a crowded drink in a cellar full of noise, you may hear the glasses clink for a million girls and boys, if I smile above the chat, I hope you realize what I'm saying with my eyes is I love you. That's the way it ought to be. So forgive me if I pray that whenever you see me, if I only look at you, you will always realize what I'm saying with my eyes is I love you. What I'm saying with my eyes is I love you.
Continuing the Kevin Spacey story, as I said, I don't think I ever met the man. I did try and contact him when the criminal case started to tell him to use my private investigator, William Merritt, who is just absolutely brilliant and can find out the most amazing things about people, which is very, very useful in any trial. I don't know whether he actually did get in touch, but as we know, in the end, the criminal case folded, and he was found not guilty on all charges. But he is now facing using the law to break the law. Now, my theory is this has been going on for some time, and the authorities behind it, like the Solicitors Regulation Authority, the Law Society, the people who look after the legal side, are absolutely furious about it. They hate it, because they consider it very much like the whiplash scandal. Do you remember the whiplash scandal that went on a few years ago, when people were pretending or claiming to have got whiplash with some kind of car accident, which often had never actually happened, but managed to get thousands of pounds from either insurance companies or another driver or whatever. And that did eventually get stamped out. I think this is now in a similar situation, the false allegations industry. mainly because the media, of course, loves stories about celebrities or even wealthy people or anybody that they can push on their front pages, that they can inflate to make sound even more awful than they were, that they can ideally get innocent people convicted and sent to jail and even die. And the media love this because it means increased circulation, increased viewing figures, bigger ratings. I mean, there is no reason, apart from being responsible, why media outlets shouldn't do that, especially social media, which of course loves to get the ticks and the clicks, and they don't care at all about people getting hurt along the way. In fact, they rather like it because an enormous amount of the people who use social media are really horrible trolls. Anyway, Kevin Spacey now seems to be facing this civil case of people who are making claims, I'm sure funded and backed by bent legal firms. Hopefully the same result will happen. Rather than settling on the courtroom steps for a few tens of thousands of quid, he will actually fight it all the way, and it will cause people to sit back and go, there's something really stinking here. And I think that's what should happen. Anyway, good luck to you, Kevin.
Maybe I should not be what your little mind commands me that I should be. You dictate to, supplicate you. You demand that I prostrate myself to love. Okay, so it's your day, but the domination station over my way. Duplicate you, I negate you, and I smile and say we're equal up above. But are we? All right, let's excite night. Let's commemorate the moment when we're uptight. In a second, minutes reckoned, we can simplify the complex of desire. See you when I want to. Other passions may destroy the interest in you. With the ego, I go, you go, and we douse the shattered carbon of our fire. But do we?
We touched on how appalling it is that so many broadcast or media outlets and corporations are only too delighted to make programmes which are grossly irresponsible and which in olden days would have been considered libelous and would have put them in the situation where they could be sued for millions of pounds. They're suddenly starting to realise that if they too use the law to break the law, it is perfectly possible to make programmes about people, either people who've been found guilty. I mean, God forbid that people like Jimmy Savile or Gary Glitter or any of the people who've been convicted, even Jonathan King, who was wrongly convicted 24 years ago, although he was acquitted on all charges of dozens of other charges in the years since then. But all these people, they suffer like mad. especially people who have died, because the media knows it can say anything about them, ruin their reputation because they're dead anyway, so they won't sue, and who really cares? Not thinking about the poor families and relations and friends of those people who always thought of them as fine, upstanding human beings. And especially the consequences can be horrendous. The Jimmy Savile thing, I'm sure, by the way, he never did any of the serious things he was accused of, although I'm equally sure he was sometimes a very naughty boy and pinched the odd bottom, tweaked the odd tit, and possibly even put his tongue down the throat of somebody who didn't want his tongue down to go through it. But either way, I'm sure he wasn't guilty of the worst things he was accused of. And no matter how you look at it and how you see it, he not only has his family and friends have their lives ruined by what happened, but worst of all, he left all his money after he died, almost all his money, to Leeds Hospital, who were going to build a heart unit that was going to cost several million quid and would have saved the lives of literally dozens of people, if not hundreds of people, including children who had serious heart problems. That has not happened now, because all the money in his estate went to bent lawyers and false accusers, and even some occasionally bits and pieces to PR people who made a fortune out of the scandal. Now, I think that's what's disgusting. I think that's what we've got to stop. Merci beaucoup. I've just had my hair cut and my beard trimmed. Don't tell me you don't notice any difference. I've noticed also that my ears are getting bigger as I get older, and I wonder if I live to be 100, which I'm fully intending to do, will I by then have turned into an elephant with those enormous ears? My trunk still remains the same size. I was going on earlier about Kevin Spacey and about how I felt that he and the lawyers behind, not him, but the accusers and the lawyers behind the accusers, who often are doing it on no-win, no-fee basis, and who basically are described by many as ambulance chasers. And I think to myself, do you know what? This is a crime. It is essentially demanding money with menaces. It is the equivalent of what blackmail used to be. They basically are saying, look, this is going to cost you a fortune if it goes to trial, so we will settle on the courtroom steps for a sum much smaller than what we're demanding. Okay, you may win at trial, but it's going to cost you even more. So why don't you settle for this now? And people generally, if they've got the money, which people like Michael Jackson had when he settled for his false accusers, and many others do as well, generally tend to go, you know what, it's just not worth the aggravation, I might as well settle. But it's out of control now. You see it happening even in politics with Trump in America, that ghastly Stormy Daniels. Was she awful or not? I mean, if you heard her evidence at his trial on the hush money scandal, which has nothing to do with sex, it's all to do with paying someone to keep their mouth shut, which I didn't think was illegal. And it isn't, of course, illegal. The whole point is, did he use money from the wrong pot? It's just absurd. It's as though humanity is breaking down. Common sense has disappeared. Friends from London joined me at the Cafe Argana in the Gemma Elfnar Square here in Marrakesh, and I told them I've been coming here for 40 years, always the same table and the same chair, and only a few years ago a suicide bomber came here, sitting in exactly my chair at my table, and blew himself up. From the wreckage of a suicide bomber to the wreckage of our culture, and my old friend and colleague on The Sun in the Bazaar page, Piers Morgan, going on about baby reindeer, which is ridiculous. It's based on a true story. All fiction is based on fact and exaggerated and inflated. Grow up, Piers. Delighted to see Timothy Spall win Best Actor for his magnificent performance in The Sixth Commandment, which also won Best TV Series. Well deserved. I hate to go all David Attenborough on you, but my peacocks, I have several ones outside, one has been really worrying me because clearly he or she has had a terrible problem to his right eye or the right side of his head, which is almost like a tumour growing out of his head, and he's become quite blind and he can't or she can't close their beak. And I noticed the other day that all the other peacocks were gently removing mites or whatever from the other side of his face. Looking back at Eurovision a week ago now, you could see why Switzerland won. If it had actually been less well staged, it would have probably got 100 points less from the public, which would have meant that Croatia would have won, which it deserved to do because Croatia was the better song. But again, you got the political voting. Loads of people voted for Israel without even hearing the song or watching it on television, simply because media told them to do that because of the few loonies who insulted and were rude to the Israeli contestant who didn't deserve that, but because they wanted to support Israel, which was, after all, rather like Russia in Ukraine, a country which invaded another country and killed hundreds of thousands of people. And for some reason, media say that's right for Israel to do it, but wrong for Russia to do it. Sorry, it's beyond me. The only other thing that you notice about Eurovision, which is now a visual contest rather than a song contest, was that the British entry, which was a dreadful song, was staged entirely to aim at the gay community. I gather it was originally meant to be in a public toilet, rather like George Michael used to do many, many years ago when times were very different. But even so, they did it in a shower room, and it was awful because it only really appealed to the really extreme gay community who were highly amused by it, thought, what a clever, funny idea. I'm sorry, it wasn't. It looked awful. It really looked awful. No wonder it got 0 points from the public vote. And that's because everyone involved in the contest, in the BBC side and the UK side, were gay. From the presenters, the commentators who were gay, the performer was gay. I'm sure, I don't know, but I'm sure the people who designed it and put it together and everything else were gay. Wrong, stupid. Do it next time. First of all, find a fucking good song, which I have to say the Croatia one was, and will probably do much better on streaming and sales than anything else. But also, be fun, be original, be clever, but mainly pick a hit song. End of play, end of Eurovision for another year, end of A Victim Bites Back, show 81. See you next episode.